whatever is the cause, we are dealing with an economic crisis. Unfortunately, judging from where we are today, there is no end in sight for the Russia-Ukraine war.
The economic wizard has become an economic lizard.
Hello, Ghanaians.
So, amid Ghana's current economic crisis, the Akufo-Addo-led government is finally compelled to run to the IMF. I'm talking of the International Monetary Fund for some cushioning. And since that news broke, guess what? Many have been asking the simple question: where is the government's economic wizard, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia? Especially because, he is the very one widely known to have criticized and tagged the previous government as incompetent for the very same IMF decision, among others. Now, for some, on a lighter note, Dr. Bawumia's loud silence on Ghana's current economic crisis, which has especially necessitated the return to the IMF, only meant the economic wizard has become an economic lizard. That's on a lighter note though, but guess what? Finally, he's come out to respond to all such critics. But before you hear from him, I entreat you to watch till the end, because you know what? His pronouncements have ironically raised a lot more questions than the answers he sought to provide, and these have been captured in this broadcast, okay? Fellow Ghanaians, let's hear it all from the horse's own mouth regarding why government had no option than to turn to the IMF now.
A global crisis that has visited untold hardships on Ghanaians, with rising prices of virtually everything, from fuel to bread to tomatoes, building materials, and so on. In the midst of this global crisis, Ghana's fiscal and debt sustainability has worsened. Some commentators and analysts have argued that the COVID-19 expenditures by government alone could not be the reason for the large increase in the fiscal deficit and the debt stock. In fact, they are right. The COVID-19 expenditures alone were not the reason for the large increase in Ghana's debt stock by the end of 2021. In fact, as I stated in my April 7th lecture this year, in addition to COVID-19, there are two major items of expenditure that are critical in understanding the evolution of the fiscal deficit and the debt stock. And these two items are the banking sector cleanup and the energy sector excess capacity payments. The excess capacity payments of 17 billion Ghana cedis relate to a legacy of take-or-pay contracts that saddled our economy with annual excess capacity charges of close to $1 billion a year. These were basically contracts to supply energy to Ghana way in excess of our requirements at the time. But we were obligated to pay for the power whether we used it or not. Not keeping up with the excess capacity payments would have meant throwing the country back into a new bout of doomsday or power outages. We were also confronted with a banking crisis as a result of the mismanagement of the banking sector. Ghana's banking system was on the verge of collapse, and not dealing with it decisively would have meant a disaster for the economy, with millions of people losing their savings. I should again note that Ghana has been hit with a quadruple whammy. the energy sector excess capacity payments, banking sector cleanup, COVID-19, and the Russia-Ukraine war. And I say again that if you take out the fiscal impact of this quadruple whammy, Ghana will not be going to the IMF for support because our fiscal and debt and balance of payments outlook would be sustainable. Of the four factors, COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war were external, and the other two, the banking sector cleanup and the excess capacity payments, were the result of policies of the previous government.
Well, as indicated earlier, for many, however, these assertions by the Vice President only beg a lot more nagging questions, and straight to the number one. Why still blame the previous government, especially after almost 6 years in office? Why is this current government now calling out the previous administration for its economic woes, particularly after taking credit and glory for the purported economic stability in especially 2019 anyway? Why? Why? Fellow Ghanaians, well, over to you.
So we had direct COVID-19 expenditures amounting to 12 billion Ghana cedis. We had the banking sector cleanup costs amounting to 25 billion Ghana cedis, and the excess capacity payments amounting to 17 billion Ghana cedis. And the data shows that the three items, when you take COVID, banking sector cleanup, and the excess capacity payments, cumulatively amounted to 54 billion Ghana cedis. And that is the equivalent of $7 billion US. So to put the expenditure on these three items in perspective, it is important to juxtapose it against the total expenditure releases on some of the government's key flagship projects, including the free SHS, the One District, One Factory, Planting for Food and Jobs, Development Authorities, the Ghana Card, Zongo Development Fund, NAPCO, Teacher Training Allowance, Nursing Training Allowance. The data shows that the total expenditure by government on these flagship policies over a 5-year period amounted to 15.6 billion Ghana cedis. 5 years of free SHS, NAPCO, and all of that, 15.6 billion Ghana cedis. And this is compared with the 54 billion Ghana cedis expenditure on the three exceptional items. So the expenditure on the three exceptional items is more than 3 times the expenditure on the flagship programs over 5 years. In fact, the annual interest cost of the borrowing, the 54 billion for the three exceptional items, would pay for double the annual cost of all the three flagship programs I've referred to.
And now to question number 2. Speaking of the financial sector cleanup, especially, in a bid to save cost and, for that matter, possibly avert the country's economic predicament, I'm just asking, couldn't the government have duly cut its coat according to its cloth in that exercise, rather than the apparently extravagant spending witnessed in the process? I'm just asking the question, Hasn't this government always spoken against borrowing more so to spend on consumption? So I'm just asking, how come? I'm just at a loss, Fellow Ghanaians, over to you again. And then to question number 3, and I'm just wondering how, how in God's name will a government spend about 3 times more the total cost of its flagship programs in areas that apparently only smack of poor management anyway? I mean, why spend a whopping 54 billion cedis in areas that were just poorly managed anyway, but spend just some 15.6 billion cedis over 5 years on your flagship programs supposed to bolster economic growth? I mean, how? Fellow Ghanaians, over to you once again.
Today, all over the world, fuel prices are rising in virtually every country. Food prices are rising, inflation is high, it's at a high for many years, currencies are falling in value, fiscal deficits are rising, debt levels are increasing. This is happening globally, and this tells us that what we are dealing with is a global phenomenon. Let me give you an analogy to make my point. If you ask a carpenter to roof your house, and he roofs this house, and suddenly the roof collapses, without any rainfall or wind, suddenly you have a collapsing of the roof. Will you not blame the carpenter who did the roofing? Will you not blame the carpenter? But if the carpenter roofs your house and the roof collapses because there's a tornado and a storm which has blown away roofs and windows and walls of many houses, will you blame the carpenter? Will you blame the carpenter? So, let us understand the context. Let us understand the context. In one situation, you will definitely blame the carpenter. In another situation, you will blame the tornado. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are interested in the way forward. Whatever is the cause, we are dealing with an economic crisis. Unfortunately, judging from where we are today, there is no end in sight for the Russia-Ukraine war. While we hope for a quick end to the war, we must understand that things could get worse before they get better. We have to steel ourselves for that because we just don't know when this war is going to end. The major lesson of the last 2 years is that we have to be more self-reliant. It is important that we take decisions that will inure to the benefit of the country, regardless of whether we are going to the IMF for a program or not. Regardless, we have to take the decisions that will help Ghana. The immediate task is to restore fiscal and debt sustainability, and these will be through revenue and expenditure measures and structural reforms. There's no way of going about that. We should also try and curtail non-concessional borrowing.
And the last but not least, question number 4, which relates to the way forward to the crisis by way of solutions proffered by the Vice President. And I'm asking, are they not the very same solutions they have been trumpeting since and even before the government took office? You know, so isn't it more like the same medication being prescribed for treating the same ailment the country continues to suffer? And so, I mean, will fellow Ghanaians then be justified to say Yatiabre, which simply translates as we're just tired of the rhetorics? Or fellow Ghanaians, well, over to you.